Hey everybody, Miss Wallace here. I want to talk to you a little bit about the scientific method. This is something we will be using throughout the year, so it is critically important that you get a good foundation before we just jump into our units of study. What you're going to see in Google Classroom, I've shared with you several slides, and we're going to fill in some information on this first slide. And you can see the slides over here to the left, and the slide that you have selected will be here in your main screen. And this is where we're going to edit some information and add some notes. There's also some other slides, and we'll kind of walk through those as we go. But what you can do is you click on the main slide, and then these boxes are text boxes, meaning that you can type your notes there. So what you see me type and what you hear me talk about, we'll be putting there. So the scientific method, it is a series of steps that all scientists use when they make observations about the natural world. And so basically they start to wonder about something and they want to see if they can figure something out. And so they start to carry out the scientific method, what we like to call the experimental process. Or an investigational process. So it's going to be a cycle. You see here in this picture, the arrows lead to the next step, but eventually they lead back to the beginning when we ask a question. And so it really is a cycle and it never stops. So we're going to click on this first box here and we're going to talk about asking a question. So when we ask a question, we're just thinking about things that we're curious about. So we could type here in the box. Let's start with things that we are curious about. Things we wonder if they're always true. So anything in life. You could be talking about the weather. You could be talking about the stars or nature itself, just things that you're curious about. I've heard lots of people say, I wonder why the sky is blue, or I wonder why this tree is growing in this way. So, first, we always start off by asking a question. The next step is gathering information. And with gathering information, this is where you try to use knowledge you may already have about the subject. So, for instance, let's take a tree, and we notice that the tree is kind of growing crooked. Well, we know that trees are plants, and plants need sunlight, they need water, and then they also need the gas that we give off as a waste product, carbon dioxide. So, those three things allow plants to carry out a process known as photosynthesis. So, we know all this information, and we need to utilize that information to carry out our investigation or our experiment. So I know that trees that grow next to other trees actually will compete for sunlight. And so maybe that's why the tree's growing crooked. But I don't know that for certain. I would need to carry that out in an experiment. So that's some information. We may actually have to do some research if it's a topic that we don't know a lot about. When you did your science fair projects last year, you might have had to do a little research to gain some knowledge before you moved on to the next step. The next step is making a hypothesis. And so we're going to type here in this box for hypothesis, make an educated guess. And the reason we say it's an educated guess is because you're using all of the knowledge that you've already gathered in your research. So it's not just that you're just guessing, right? If I just make a guess about something, I'm just clueless. I'm just guessing. But an educated guess is because we're using all the information we gathered in our research about the subject. Now, very important to make your educated guess in a complete sentence. So let's add that there. And it's usually an if-then sentence. So we're going to say a complete sentence. And we're going to start it if. And then I'm going to do some dots. And then type then dots. So that's representing the type of statement we would be making. If trees need sunlight, then they're going to grow towards the sunlight. That would be an example of a hypothesis. Your hypothesis is not always proven correct at the end of your experiment. And guess what? That's okay. That's a part of the experimental process. So you see, it's a cycle because we go back to the beginning. So after we've made our hypothesis, then we're going to conduct our experiment. When you conduct your experiment, you need detailed procedures. So detailed, very detailed. So detailed that if I wanted to repeat your investigation or experiment, I could just look at what you have written and I could carry out the exact same experiment. I also want to conduct with, do multiple trials. So if I do an experiment, I don't want to just do it once. I want to repeat it for multiple trials. The more trials you do, the better your results or the more accurate your results are going to be, either supporting your hypothesis or not supporting your hypothesis. And another really critical thing, and I'm going to probably type this in all caps, only one variable. So the variable is what changes in your experiment. So you only want one. So for instance, let's take our tree experiment. So I'm going to use an oak tree, right? And I only want to use an oak tree. I don't want to use oak, elm, and pine trees. That's 3 different trees. And my variable in my experiment would be the amount of sunlight, because that's what relates back to my question. Remember, we were asking if trees always grow towards the sunlight. So I want to give all 3 of my oak trees, if I'm doing 3 trials, the same amount of water. However, one tree may be in an area with lots of sunlight. Another tree may be in an area where it's getting minimal sunlight, some, but not all. And then another one that maybe I actually have in a closet somewhere where it's getting no sunlight. So my only variable would be the amount of sunlight that the tree is getting. You only want one. If I have more than one variable, I'm not exactly sure what led to my results. So a good experiment only has one variable. Along the way, you're going to be collecting and analyzing data. A lot of times this is in the form of numbers. So maybe I'm measuring the height of my tree. Maybe I'm just observing, are the leaves wilting? Are they turning brown? So the whole time you're doing your experiment, you're always collecting data. Without the data, you don't have results. Okay. So after you've collected your data and you analyze them, you can draw a conclusion about your results. And so this conclusion could support your hypothesis, or it might not. And guess what? It's okay if it doesn't, because that's part of that experimental design. If it doesn't support your hypothesis, you're going to repeat these steps carrying out a different investigation. Maybe you're changing your variable up. So we're going to type here in this box, may or may not support your hypothesis. We repeat the whole process. So it doesn't just stop. It's called a cycle because it continues on and on. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to type these same notes into your little boxes. And if you need a little help, the following slides give you a little bit more information. So if you're still unclear about something, you can actually click on these slides, like ask a question, gather information. It's going to give you some more ideas. I talked about some of these, but there's just a few more details on these slides. And you could always add more notes if you want to. Now, I would love for you to be able to print this out and keep it in a notebook. We're going to be keeping science journals at school. And so if you can build your notebook, that would be fantastic. However, if you don't have a printer at home and you don't have access anywhere else, you should be able to print at the public library. You can always save these into a folder. So if you come up here to the top and you just click move, then you can tell it where to go to. So you could create a science folder there and everything would be in your science folder. So you would always be able to go back and access it, because we're going to need the information for the scientific method throughout the year. It's going to be very, very important. So if you have any questions, make sure you let me know, and good luck experimenting.